Hi, I'm Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club's weekly video. And this is a very exciting week at RNK Distributing because we recently released new versions of all of our software programs. And so if you haven't already downloaded them, we invite you to do that now. And if you're not sure how to do that, if you look on your software under the Help drop-down menu, there are several things here that could help you. First of all, if you look under About, that will tell you what exact version you are currently using. And if you look under Check for Updates, that will bring you to the correct place on our website to discover what the latest version that you can download is. Go ahead and download it. And there are many videos that I recorded to go along with that update, how to do the update as well as what's new in the latest version. And finally, if you need any help with anything along the way, please feel free to use the Create a Support ticket, and this will take you on the website and allow you to provide us with, either how to contact us information and a box where you can tell us what your issue is. And I often say to people, that's also a great way to give us suggestions for how to make the software even cooler for the future. So anyhow, today's video, I'm going to talk about this design of an applique of a pumpkin. And I've previously recorded on this design for a recent video where we talked about how I made the jagged edge applique. I created the sort of jagged edges on my appliques. And so you can see that in my design, how I've used... Whoops, that's the wrong. I wanted to zoom in on it and kind of show you that I used that cool jagged edge, and I actually used the SoFab foam to make my pumpkin look extra kind of squishy, if you will. Anyhow, today I wanted to talk about how I made the cool twisty vine and how I created the interesting stitch effect for the vines. And so let's go ahead and pop over to the software. And I'll start with the vines. You see, the vine is simply a line. Like if I'm going to click copy and make a copy of that line and just bring it over here and maybe just set it off as a different color just so that I can kind of identify that shape for later so I can delete it and not mess up my design, right? So what I'm saying is, if I click on this and just convert it back into a run stitch, so down at the bottom, you'll see it's simply a line that I drew. And that line was converted into a motif. So let me hit undo. So the motif, if I select on it, it's number 229. And essentially it makes a chain pattern. The stitch will go, here I'll turn on the 3D here. The stitch will go forward, take a step back into the left, over across to the right, and forward again. So it's forward, back, across, forward. Forward, back, across, forward. So every stitch creates kind of a small chain like that. Well, to make it a little bit interesting, I also used a variable size. See, it says it's a convex variable size. And that means if you, let's see, I'm just going to click on the artwork tool and draw a line. So I'll click, and right click. And so I drew a new piece of artwork and I'll select it. And now that I have it selected, I'll come down and click on the motif run line option. And so you'll see that a normal motif run line has a consistent width to it. And this is the option here. So always you go to your properties box to make fine-tune adjustments to your settings. And in this case, yes, I can change the type of motif that's used by just changing that number. But if I look below where it says variable size, if I turn it to be an increasing, then it'll start small and get bigger. See that? Or if I go the opposite, decreasing, well, it's going to change the direction. So now it starts bigger and gets smaller. And so then convex and concave, so those will go from kind of like small to big and back to small again. Or the opposite, it can go from big to small and back to big again. And so when and I'll just delete that, when I created, just hit delete on my keyboard, when I created the vine, I used the convex option so that it gets kind of small, gets bigger through the middle, and then gets smaller again. It just adds a little bit more dimension to it. So sometimes being creative can be as easy as that. Just a couple of adjustments on your settings. So that's one thing I wanted to cover on today's video. And the other one that I thought was unique about the way this design was stitched out is the way that I made the vine itself. And like I said, I had to use two different techniques to do it. You see, and let's see if I select right here. There's a fill, And see in my sequence view, there's a fill and a satin path. And so maybe I can just click on the artwork tool and draw a line, a shape for you again. And so I'll draw kind of like a container, an area that has sides around it. You know, you can make it any shape you want. It doesn't matter. But when I right click, I've drawn this shape. Now, if I select on that shape and come down here and tell it to be a wave fill, that's what I use to make the sort of fatter area of this shape, a wave fill. And with the wave fill, I think I chose wave fill for this because it went from quite a thick area here to kind of, it got skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And so the wave fill gives kind of a nice, even density, I think is the word I'm looking for. So, okay. First of all, I've turned on a wave fill, and if I get close to it, you can kind of see that it has a wavy pattern. But to make the vine shape, I needed to go into shape mode. So I have it selected currently with my select tool. Now I go down to two tools, to the shape tool. And when I'm in the shape tool, I can see the points that make up that shape. I can see the green entry point and the red exit point, and I can see the line that creates the actual wave. And so what I did was I moved the points of that line around to get it to be kind of the curvature that I wanted for that handle. Now, I'm going to point out that these points have what are known as tangents. Can you see them? Let me see if I turn off the 3D. Can you see them there? And those tangents affect the curve. And when I moved them around, they kind of had created an extra twist to it that I didn't want. And one way I can fix that is by just adjusting the tangents to get it to be exactly the wave that I want. Another thing I could do is select on them, right click, and tell it to smooth them out, which kind of like tells it to fix your line sort of thing. I don't really care how you fix it. I just want you to know that you can fix it. Because ultimately what I want is to do something like that, and then when I hit enter or apply, the wave now follows my shape. And so can you see, if I kind of deconstruct this handle, how that shape right there has a wave that is meant to kind of create that first line? And like I said, the reason I chose the wavy standard fill is because it's quite a bit wider here than it is up at the top. And the reason I say that is because had I used the other technique, which we'll learn now, is how I made this vine. It's actually what's called a satin path. And so a satin path, and again, I'll just go ahead and draw a piece of artwork. So I'll make, kind of a shape that it could even kind of turn around. I'm not going to fuss over my points and get them all curvy. Here, hold down the control key and then you can get smoother points. Won't affect the tool, just affects the shape and how smooth it is. Anyhow, if you left click, you get corner points. If you hold down the control key, it makes your points rounded. And when you right click, you stop drawing points and you've drawn a piece of artwork. Now I select that artwork. Okay, you know that if I click on standard fill, it'll fill it in. And you know that if I click on wave fill, it'll fill it in with a wavy pattern. But if you want to choose any of these satin path options, what's missing are the inclinations. And so if I tell it that I want to make it a contour satin, which is what I used, it goes empty and it waits for me to tell it, okay, this is one inclination, this is one inclination, that's one, and that's one. And those inclinations help the software understand where the end of the shape is and what the sides are. You can also choose where it'll start sewing and where it will stop. So I guess I have to right click to stop doing inclinations so that I can interact with the green and red entry and exit points. And then when I right click again, it makes those contouring lines. And so can you see that? How that turned into this? How this vine, if I choose the shape tool, has a bunch of little inclinations. And so essentially what I just described is the two kind of core tools of our software. Because as you know, if you draw a shape, and so I draw a shape, and I select that shape, and I click on standard fill, it gives me one inclination, and it can be any inclination, but only one. But if I take that same shape and I click on to make a satin satin path, then it waits for me to tell it there's this inclination and there's this inclination, and it will turn from one to the other when I right click. Can you see that? So now the stitches are turning. Well, so what I'm telling you is everything in this bottom list is a satin path. And to use it, you need to create an inclination. Just maybe one more example of it. I'll take a shape, any old shape you want, and then I'll right click to stop drawing, select it, and let's try the spiral satin paths. And again, you have to give it at least one or more inclination, and when you right click, it'll fill it in with a spiral satin path. And so at the end of the day, if you look at my vine, you can see that I made this one with a fill, with a wave fill effect, and I made this one as a satin path with a contouring effect. And together, they kind of went together. And so the issue was, and I don't know if I made this clear, with this shape here, I'll just make a copy of it. I could have done this shape also as a satin path, and so I will, just so you get an idea of what happens. So we'll choose the satin path, and I'll tell it to go from this inclination to that inclination, and then right click. And so it's not wrong, it's just a different look, because now it has to sort of go out to match that and come over to here. Does that make sense to you? So I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong. They both kind of look swirly and viney like. It's just that in mine, it's more of a smoother line that followed the shape, whereas this one, it kind of followed the shape, I guess, more closely, and it contours and it creates a bit of a point there. Now that I'm looking at it, maybe I like that better. Who knows? That said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Deconstructing Pumpkins with Trevor Conquergood. Until next week, have a great day. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.